In this video, we are going to take a look at entering your first AP bill into Eldermark Financials. To do that, we need to go up here to Menu on the top, come down to Accounts Payable, go into the Data Entry area, and click the Bills and Adjustment screen. Now we call this an AP bill in Eldermark Financials because the type is bill. You might refer to this though as an AP invoice. It's really the same thing, just different terminology. So AP bill, AP invoice means the same thing. The first thing I need to do is choose a vendor. So I'm going to use this magnifying glass in the vendor field to do that. And actually before I do that, let me point out, you'll notice next to all of the required fields that you have this red star. Now it's red because the fields are currently empty. Once I put information into those fields, the red star should turn into a black star, but it's starred because it's a required field. So if I use this magnifying glass, in the first column you'll notice the vendor number. It's just a meaningless number that uniquely identifies the vendor in the system. I probably care more about the name, so the second column has my vendor name. To choose a vendor, I can either double click it or just select it and use this select button to choose it. And you'll see it defaults in some information. So not only did it put in the vendor, which I can see the full name by hovering over the field, it also defaulted in a primary location, and it defaulted in the payment terms. You'll see that those red stars went to black because now there's information in the fields. The payment terms here, in this case 30 days, are used to determine the due date for this AP bill. You can see that I'm entering this invoice on May 22nd. I would backdate the date to the date of the actual invoice. I'll just leave it with today's date for this example. But then the terms of 30 days is what's causing the due date here to get set to June 21st. I could change the terms. It's just defaulting from the vendor's record for now. I have another required field here called vendor ref. Now the vendor ref field, ref is short for reference, so the vendor reference field is where you're going to put in the vendor's invoice number. So maybe it's something like INV with some numbers after it, just as an example. Once I move out of the field, you'll see the star changes from red to black, just like our vendor fields did. The next field down is called description. This one does not have a star next to it, so it is not required. But if I want to, I can put in a description for the AP bill. Maybe this is my monthly phone expense, as an example. And with that, I've got in all the information that I need at the header level of my AP bill. Now I need to come down to this Document Details tab, and to add a line, I can either click this plus icon, or I can just click anywhere in the white space of the grid. So I'll click down here and you'll see it adds a row. There's a lot of fields down here, and we'll cover them in later videos, but for our example, we're just going to care about a few fields. And the first one is EXT cost. That stands for extended cost. This is where I'm going to put in my amount. So maybe I have a $50 invoice. I'll put in 50 here. Now you'll notice up on the top that the detail total currently says 0. As soon as I move out of this field, you'll see that the detail total gets updated to 50. This is going to add up all of the lines. I only have one line for $50 in this case, but the fields up on the top here are going to add the amounts from all the lines together and show a total. Also on the top, you'll see that the detail total and the balance are the same. That's because the total of all my lines is 50, and then the open amount that has not yet been paid on this invoice is also 50 because it's a brand new invoice. These will be different later on once we actually record payments against the invoice. The balance will eventually go to 0, but the detail total will stay as a sum of all the lines. So we put in our EXT cost. Then next we need to put in our GL account. You can see that's a required field, so I click in there. And I can either choose it the same way I chose my vendor by using the magnifying glass, or in this case what I'll do is I'll just start typing in the field. So if I just type phone, it does a search across all of my GL accounts. In this case it only found one, and I can select it right here. So I put in my amount, I put in my GL account. We'll talk about the other fields in a later video. I will point out that amount is actually a grayed out read-only field because it has to do with the discounts, which we'll talk about later. Just note that EXT cost is the one that you want to put your amount in. And also I'll point out the transaction description field is where if you had multiple lines on an AP bill and maybe you wanted to record a different description on each line, that's where you could use the transaction description. In my case I only have one line, so I'm just going to use the regular description field. I don't care to paste it down in here. Now at this point I put in all the information that I need, but I have not yet saved my AP bill. And you can tell because in the reference number field you can see that it says new. It does not yet have a document number in the system. So if I were to close my web browser or even just move to another page, so I just clicked on another screen, you should get a message that says this page is asking you to confirm that you want to leave. Data you have entered may not be saved. If I were to leave the page, I would lose all of my work. So just note that it is not auto-saving your information. You do have to click the save icon to save it. Let's go ahead and stay on the page. And we'll come up here and there's my save icon. Also, if I wanted to cancel, at this point I could, and same thing, I would basically lose all of my work. So I'll go ahead and click save. And now I get a document number. So I have my reference number of 1130 in this case. This is kind of like my vendor number V002, which is giving me a unique identifier for the vendor. The reference number is just a unique internal number for my AP bill. When you're looking it up, you're probably going to use the vendor reference because that's the vendor's invoice number. But the system is giving it just its own internal document number. And then because the save doesn't happen until you click the save icon, what I recommend is if you're doing a large invoice with a lot of lines on it, I would just save frequently. So if you do accidentally close your browser or click on another screen or something happens with your internet connection, you won't lose your work. You would only lose whatever you've done since you last clicked the save button. And then the last piece I'll point out in this video is that currently the status is on hold. For the sake of entering your first AP bill, I wouldn't worry about the status. It's either going to be on hold or it's going to be balanced, and that just depends on the configuration in your system. We'll cover the statuses in more detail in a later video. So for our sake, in this first video, I'm finished. I've entered my AP bill and I've saved it into the system.